Let's first start with why I say Allison Court didn't even try in Darkside Chronicles. Just take a look at these clips from both games focusing on her accent.
What was that all about?
There's some information I need to find out. Were there any computers around here?
What are you talking about? I have no idea what you're babbling about.
Oh? You must be one of Umbrella's lower level officers if you're in command of a backwater base like this one.
I still don't follow you. I really don't know anything about that.
Not sure. It's one hell of a house, though.
That's got nothing to do with us. Look, we all need to get out of here right now, okay?
What about you?
What about you?
What about you?
What about you? What's your story?
Given that we know Claire Redfield is from the American Midwest and is not from Canada, Claire sounds a lot more American in Code Veronica compared to Darkside Chronicles. This tells you that Allison Court took Claire Redfield's Code Veronica performance as seriously as Tom Hardy takes Eddie Brock in Venom. Because Tom Hardy is British, Eddie Brock is American, and Eddie Brock sounds American.
No, you cannot. All right, we need to reiterate this. There are good people in this world, a lot of them, and then there are bad people. You have to tell the difference. The deal is you will only ever be allowed to touch, harm, hurt, possibly, very possibly, eat very, very bad people, but never, ever, ever good people. All right?
Around this time as well, Allison did some live action stuff, and I think even returned for season 6 of The Big Comfy Couch. If you've seen bits and pieces of season 6, compare her accent in season 6 to the first 5 seasons, especially season 5. You will notice that Allison sounds more American in season 6. And if you actually heard Allison Court talk, you will realize that Allison has a strong Canadian raising accent. The fact that she worked very hard to suppress this Canadian raising accent in Code Veronica shows you how seriously she took that role, and in comparison, how little effort she put in Darkside Chronicles. I mean, in Darkside Chronicles, Claire sounds more Canadian than Bill Houston, Steve. But moving on, in Code Veronica X, Claire seems more pragmatic, more careful, and even more mature. We can see in the beginning of Code Veronica, surviving Raccoon City toughened her up.
Shut up. Make one wrong move and I'll shoot.
She even offers to work with Steve in the beginning.
I'll see ya.
Hey, wait up.
I don't want you following me, lady.
In Darkside Chronicles, Claire starts the game weaker. She actually plays around with Steve.
Rockford Prison, detainee 267. Guess you're not with Umbrella then, are you? I'm Claire Redfield.
Damn, girl. You scared me.
Eyes forward. So, what's your name?
My name's Steve.
Knowing that a biohazard is no place to play around, she doesn't even want to work with Steve in the beginning.
Look, there's some information I need to find out. Were there any computers around here?
There are 3. The guards had them. Only used them for games. Oh, and porn, too. Hey, where are you going?
You don't have to come if you don't want to.
Giggity. Hey, I think we should go back. I have a bad feeling about this.
Go right ahead.
And she also seems to be a little less mature in Darkside Chronicles. She seems to be acting more out of impulse than pragmatism. The compassionate element of Claire is there, but the sassiness and the maturity of Claire Redfield from Code Veronica seems to be a bit missing in Darkside Chronicles. In CVX, if I didn't drive this point home already, Claire finds Chris's location thanks to Steve, who inadvertently found that information and told it to Claire.
Well, it seems your brother is under surveillance by Umbrella.
What?
As a result, when Chris finds Claire, she isn't that surprised. As in CVX, Claire sent a distress message to Chris via Leon. So she half expected him to be there.
Chris,
missed you so much.
In Darkside Chronicles, Claire does not find Chris's location and she asks Leon to come save them.
Looks like my brother was never even here. Umbrella probably doesn't know where he is either. Anyway, I've got to contact Leon. He'll come for us.
So what does Leon do? Leon finds Chris, indicating that Claire didn't need to go to Paris in the first place. All she had to do is wait for Leon to find Chris. Leon uses his own connections that Claire has nothing to do with to find Chris's location. And what does Leon do after that? He tells Chris to go save Claire. And this is why Claire acts so surprised when she finds Chris on the Antarctica base. Because Claire was expecting Leon, not Chris.
Chris? Chris! I've been so worried.
How did you get here?
Leon contacted me.
Leon? You know him?
Chris. I missed you so much.
I know. But we have to get out of here.
Not yet. We have to find Steve. Chris? Chris! I've been so worried.
In this way as well, Darkside Chronicles has even less to do with the Claire-Chris reunion, because in Darkside Chronicles, Claire didn't even know where Chris was. At least in Code Veronica X, Claire knew where Chris was at the beginning of the game. Claire is more cautious in Code Veronica X, but in Darkside Chronicles, she's actually a bit more stupider, as she wants to help the person who nearly shot her head off in Darkside Chronicles.
Look out!
Look, we all need to get out of here right now, okay?
This shows Claire's naivety, and maybe she didn't learn as much from Raccoon City compared to the original Resident Evil 2 and Code Veronica X. In Code Veronica X, Claire acts suspicious of both people who tried to shoot her.
Wait, don't shoot.
Who are you?
Thought you were another one of those.
Shut up. Make one wrong move and I'll shoot. Oh? You must be one of Umbrella's lower level officers if you're in command of a backwater base like this one.
Whereas in DSC, Claire acts with initial compassion towards Alfred. In Code Veronica, Claire, rightfully so, talks back to Alfred because Alfred just tried to kill her. In both versions, Claire figures out that something is bothering Steve. But in CVX, Claire figures out a bit more accurately that Steve's trauma has something to do with trusting people. In DSC, Claire is not this perceptive, further showing DSC Claire's lack of maturity. Claire acts more childish in Darkside Chronicles, and this is, I think, what Allison Court was referring to in that podcast. I mean, she obviously does not remember the events of Code Veronica X that well when she did that podcast. But she said something like, once Chris showed up, she got to be the baby sister again. This thing happens more explicitly in Darkside Chronicles and barely happens at all, if it does, in Code Veronica X. Chris actually trusts and even scolds Claire to find Steve on her own.
Just go. I'll be fine.
But Chris...
You've got to save Steve. Go!
And only steps in when she found Claire crying so hard that Chris knew Claire is in no mental state to fight. Let me touch on the confidence levels again. Notice all these cutscenes and try and associate one word with her confidence levels.
There's no way he could get here, even if he is your brother.
Yes, he can. I'm sure of it.
Commander of this base.
Oh? You must be one of Umbrella's lower level officers if you're in command of a backwater base like this one. You still have plenty of ammo. You don't have to worry about holding back.
We can't take off unless we raise the bridge.
Leave that to me. You stay here and make the preparations for takeoff.
What was wrong?
Oh, nothing. Just a giant cockroach that had to be stepped on.
Hold on. I'll waste that monster and come back.
Claire, forget about me. Run!
The one word that comes to my mind is overconfident. Now, look at these cutscenes after Steve dies in Code Veronica X. Also, paying attention to her body language.
You made it!
Of course.
What are we gonna do?
I'll keep her busy. Just go for the emergency elevator.
Chris, but...
I can take care of this. Just go.
You have to make it. Don't die on me.
Chris, where are you?
And 7 years after losing Steve, what does Claire say?
I know what Leon would do.
Anyone with even the most basic knowledge of human psychology will tell you that Claire is resorting to vicarious acquisition, where you try to emulate someone more competent than you. This is basic 101 Banduran psychology. Considering by degeneration, Claire is showing this type of vicarious acquisition behavior. This tells you that something unique happened to Claire that did not happen to Leon, and both of them survived 2 biohazards. And this unique thing that happened to Claire that didn't happen to Leon caused her to appear weaker than what she did in Code Veronica when she appeared in Degeneration, as correctly pointed out by Scorpion. This shows you that one of the things that was broken when she lost Steve was her confidence levels. And this can only happen if Steve meant everything to her. She couldn't rescue Steve, so she joined an organization that goes around rescuing victims of biohazards through supplemental support. I hope by now you guys begin to comprehend the psychological damage losing Steve did to her. This entire journey, going from a girl who is overconfident to having no confidence whatsoever, this mental journey from super strong to mentally broken, this is missing from Darkside Chronicles. And I'm sorry if anyone says that Claire not mentioning Steve is because Steve happened a very long time ago and Claire not mentioning Steve is a strawman argument, then I'm very sure that me and the millions of other Resident Evil fans view this notion as idiotic and uneducated AF. Claire and Leon, both of them talk about the events of Raccoon City, which happened before the events of Code Veronica, a gap of 7 years. Chris talks about meeting Wesker on Rockford Island in Resident Evil 5, gap of 11 years. Sherry talks about Raccoon City in Resident Evil 6, gap of 15 years. And Claire talks about Harvardville in Death Island, gap of 10 years. But the one thing she cannot talk about is losing Steve. And this is only possible if losing Steve mentally broke her. And if you still don't believe me and think this is only fan theory, I challenge you to prove it. Fan theory is not anything that is not explicitly mentioned. More about that in a future section. But back to CVX versus DSC. The death of Steve has less of an impact on Claire in Darkside Chronicles compared to Code Veronica. In CVX, Claire was crying so hard that she could barely talk. I'll go into a bit more detail on why Allison Court herself sold the severity of this in a future section in this video. In DSC, Claire gives this look as if she vows to avenge him.
Alexia has to be stopped.
In both versions, Chris doesn't want Claire to fight alongside him with Alexia. Whereas before Steve's death, Chris trusted Claire to hold her own in both versions. But in CVX, the death of Steve clearly had a bigger impact on Claire than DSC. During the Alexia battle, at this point, Claire is stepping back in fear in CVX And in DSC, Claire is holding a gun. In CVX, Claire is holding her chest with an expression of fear. In DSC, Claire starts talking back to Alexia.
You think everyone in this world is here to serve you, don't you?
Keeping in mind that Claire started CVX stronger than she did DSC, this clearly means that Steve meant a lot more to Claire in CVX compared to DSC. Thankfully, Darkside Chronicles is not canon. Even at the final cutscene in Code Veronica X, Claire, through body language, is mourning Steve's death. You don't believe me? Watch this scene very carefully, knowing that Capcom intentionally focused on Claire's trembling left hand going very slowly to the back of Chris's seat.
Chris, promise me. Please promise that you won't leave me alone again.
If you know anything about how the body reacts to receiving traumatic information, then you know that your body starts to tremble. Your arms and your legs start to feel heavier. This is because there is much more blood being drawn to the brain, because the brain is trying to come to terms with making sense of the traumatic information and processing it. And right after that, we see Claire's facial expression where she's about to cry and looks significantly sadder than Chris, who himself is showing a very neutral expression. And yes, I verified this with other fully sighted people, all of whom say that Claire looks sadder than Chris. This is Claire selling, using a pro wrestling term, selling the devastating mental effect of losing Steve. This entire selling dynamic that through body language, Claire is selling the devastating effect of losing Steve on Claire's psyche. This entire thing is missing in Darkside Chronicles. At this point, Claire is not even looking at the camera in Darkside Chronicles.